Welcome learners to today's lesson of multiplication and division of integers. Let's start our lesson with a did you know? So did you know that the answer to a real number being squared will always be positive? Within the real number system, no matter how much you search, there is no number that you can multiply by itself or square that will ever give you a negative answer. Let's see how this happens in today's lesson. So let's start off our lesson with our lesson objectives. By the end of this lesson, you must be able to perform calculations with integers involving multiplication and division, use commutative, associative, and distributive properties of multiplication for integers, perform calculations involving multiple operations with or without brackets, and lastly, perform calculations involving squares, cubes, square roots, and cube roots of integers. So in today's concept map, we are focusing on integers, but remember, multiplication and division for today's lesson. So we are going to be focusing on two aspects, that is calculation with integers, where we are going to look at multiplication and division with integers, and also squares, cubes, square roots, and cube roots of integers. Then we are going to look at our second aspect, that is properties of integers, multiplicative inverses for integers, and commutative, associative, and distributive properties of integers. Let's move on to the pre-knowledge that you are supposed to have for this lesson. So you must know how to perform calculations that involve multiplication and division with whole numbers, apply the commutative, associative, and distributive properties of whole numbers, and determine the square roots, cube, and cube roots of whole numbers. Let's do some practice on that pre-knowledge, so things that you are supposed to know already. Now, this is a multiplication of whole numbers. What you should remember here is that multiplication is commutative. So this means that we can swap them around. So 6 multiplied by 7 is the same as 7 multiplied by 6. The answer will be the same, and that is our 42. The next one here is 4 multiplied by 9. Again, this is commutative. We can say 9 multiplied by 4, so that would be 9 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 9. The answer is still the same. We are looking at 36. Then remember, whole numbers or multiplication is also associative, where we can associate certain numbers before we can calculate it. So if I associate the 9 multiplied by 2 first, we know that 9 multiplied by 2 is 18, and when I multiply that with the 10, then the answer is going to be 180. The same would be if I had associated the 2 multiplied by the 10, the answer would still be the same, and we would have an answer of 180. The last one there for associative is 8 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 7. So I can start off by saying that I am going to associate the 3 and the 7. And we know that 3 multiplied by 7 is 21. And when I multiply that with the 8, the answer is still going to be the same. And that is an answer of 168. Let's move on to the distributive property. So remember, when I am working with numbers, I can either work out what is in the brackets first, or I can distribute it. So if I distribute these numbers, I can say they're 5 multiplied by 3, which gives me an answer of 15, and I'm going to add that to 5 multiplied by 10, and that is going to be a 50. When I add those two together, 15 plus 50 is 65. The same if I have 8 multiplied by open bracket 6 minus 2. So I can distribute those numbers there. So 8 multiplied by 6 is 48. And I'm going to subtract that with 8 multiplied by 2. And 8 multiplied by 2 is 16. And if I say now 48 minus 16, the answer will be 32. And again, if I have 3 multiplied by 4 and 3 and in brackets I have 4 plus 12, I can still distribute it. 3 multiplied by 4 is 12, and because I am adding there, 3 multiplied by 12, that is 36. And if I add those two, that is going to give me an answer of 48. And the last one there, I'm going to distribute those. 9 multiplied by 5 is 45. And if I minus 9 multiplied by 2, that gives me 18. So if I say 45 minus 18, we know that that will give me an answer of 27. Right, let's look at when we determine the square and the square roots of whole numbers. So 3 squared we know is 3 multiplied by 3. That answer is 9. The square root of 9 would be the square root of 3 multiplied by 3. And we know that is the square root of 3 squared. That is just going to give me an answer of 3. 7 squared is 7 multiplied by 7. And when we say 7 multiplied by 7, we know the answer is 49. The same goes for the square root of 49. That is the square root of 7 squared, which is going to give me an answer of 7. What about when we are looking at our cube numbers and our cube roots? So we have the 5 cubed. This means that 5 will be multiplied by itself twice. So that is 5. And we are going to multiply it by itself once. We're going to multiply it by itself again, meaning we've multiplied it by itself twice. That gives us an answer of 125. So 125 is a cube number. So for us to find the cube root of 125, well, we know that 125 is 5 cubed. So that means that our answer is going to be 5. If I have 2 cubed, again, 2 is going to be multiplied by itself twice. And we know that 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2 gives us an answer of 8. And when we are looking at the cube root of 8, then we are talking about the cube root of 2 cubed. And that gives us an answer of 2. Let's look at the keywords that we are going to be working with during this lesson. We have the square numbers, and that is the value you get when you multiply a number by itself once. For example, 3 multiplied by 3, that is 3 squared, and the answer there is 9. So 9 is a square number. Then we have a square root, that is the number that was multiplied by itself to get the square number. So the number where a square number comes from. For example, if I have the square root of 9, that is the square root of 3 multiplied by 3, which is the square root of 3 squared, and our answer there is 3. This means that the 3 is our square root. Then we have a cube number, the value you get when you multiply a number by itself 2 times. For example, 5 times 5 times 5. That is 5 cubed, or 5 exponent 3, and that gives us an answer of 125. This means that the 125 is the cube number. Then we have a multiplicative inverse, which can also be called the reciprocal. That is the number that you multiply with another number to get 1. So for example, the multiplicative inverse of 3 divided by 4 is 4 divided by 3, because 3 divided by 4 multiplied by 4 divided by 3 is 1. So the answer there is 1. That's why these two are multiplicative inverses of each other. Then lastly, we have the cube root. That is the number that was multiplied by itself 2 times to get the cube number. The number where a cube number comes from. For example, the cube root of 125 is equals to the cube root of 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5. That is the cube root of 5 cubed, and our answer there is 5. This means that the cube root of 125 is 5. The 5 is the cube root. Let's quickly go to an ad break, and then we'll see you just now.